You ever meet someone who walks into your life like they're doing you a favor? Who acts like love is a prize you have to earn from them, instead of something you build together? Yeah, his ego was loud enough to drown out respect, empathy, and every red flag you were trying to ignore. But here's the thing about ego, it's fragile. And eventually life humbles those who refuse to do the work themselves. Today, we're talking about what happens when someone takes you for granted and karma quietly walks in to do what you no longer have to. When someone walks through life with a loud ego, constantly broadcasting their worth, achievements, or charm, it's easy to be drawn in. At first, the confidence seems magnetic. They seem to know who they are, what they want, and how to get it. But as time passes, you start to notice something else. That loudness isn't confidence, it's noise. And underneath that noise is often insecurity, masked by the need to impress, to dominate conversations, to be the center of every room. Truly confident people don't need to prove themselves constantly, because their sense of self doesn't depend on outside validation. They just are. Quiet confidence is rooted. Loud ego is often compensating. When someone's ego is loud, especially in relationships, they need to constantly reinforce a version of themselves that feels powerful. Because deep down, they're afraid you might see the parts they don't want to confront. The parts that feel not enough. That fear drives them to seek attention, admiration, and control. They need to feel superior. Even if it means making you feel small, they might downplay your successes, interrupt you, tell stories where they're always the hero. Not because they're trying to hurt you, but because they can't bear the thought of not being the most important person in the room or in your life. And you might have mistaken that noise for strength. It's a common trap. When we meet someone who seems so sure of themselves, we often think, maybe they'll help me feel more sure of myself too. But what actually happens is the opposite. You end up walking on eggshells, constantly trying to earn approval, or feeling like you're never quite measuring up. You start shrinking just to avoid conflict, or to maintain the illusion that everything is okay. And that illusion serves their ego, not your well-being. What they fear most, though, is silence. Not from you, but from the world. They fear the moment they're no longer the center of attention. That's when the cracks begin to show. That's when the temporary high of validation wears off and they're left with themselves. That's when insecurity, which they tried so hard to bury under ego, comes to the surface. Because without someone clapping for them, without someone admiring them, who are they? When the performance ends and the audience leaves, there's no applause. Just silence. And that silence is deafening for someone who never learned to be enough on their own. This is why karma doesn't always look like payback. It often looks like isolation. Like the very people they tried to impress no longer being impressed. Like you, the person they took for granted, not fighting to stay. It looks like life stripping away the things they used to define themselves: admiration, attention, influence. It's not always dramatic. It's not about revenge. It's about reality realigning. And nothing realigns more quickly than when ego burns through the very connections it needs to survive. So when you see someone living loudly, making noise about who they are, remember that real strength doesn't need a spotlight. The ones who are grounded, who know their worth, don't scream it. They live it. And if someone tries to overshadow you with their ego, understand that their volume is not your responsibility. Their noise is their fear talking. And that fear will eventually have to face itself, because karma is patient. And it always shows up. Some people approach love like it's a competition, a game to be won rather than a connection to be nurtured. They come in with charm, strategy, and all the right moves, but what they're really doing is performing. To them, relationships aren't about mutual growth or emotional intimacy. They're about validation, control, and power. He played the game to win, not to love. And that's why, no matter how much you gave or how deeply you felt, it never seemed to be enough. Because he wasn't really there to build something real. He was there to feel like a winner. When someone plays this game, They don't truly see the person in front of them. You become a mirror for their ego, a token of status, or a placeholder for their insecurities. They might say all the right things, act the part, and give just enough to keep you close. But it's always calculated. Everything is transactional. They show affection when it benefits them. They withdraw when they want control, and they give breadcrumbs just enough to keep you questioning, chasing, hoping. You end up feeling like you're constantly auditioning for a role in their life that they never actually intend to cast permanently. And the worst part, they know exactly what they're doing. They're not confused. They're not emotionally unavailable in some vague, helpless way. They're protecting their position. They don't want vulnerability because vulnerability requires authenticity, and authenticity threatens their control. If they let down their guard, if they meet you on the same level, they might lose the game. And for someone playing to win, that's unacceptable. But here's the truth: when someone treats love like a performance, they never really win. They might collect admirers. They might have flings, followers, people who fawn over them. But none of it fills the emptiness they're running from. Because connection built on performance is hollow. The mask always slips eventually. The act gets old. And when you play people instead of loving them, eventually those people walk away, not because they lost, but because they realized the game was rigged from the start. He may have thought he was winning when he had your attention, when you tried harder, loved deeper, gave more. But the irony is, the more you gave, the less he respected it, because he never valued what he didn't have to earn. And now that you're no longer playing, that's when karma steps in, not as punishment but as truth, because now he's left with the aftermath of what he created, a life filled with shallow victories and no one truly standing by him. People like him often look back years later and realize they never built anything real. Just moments, ego boosts, temporary highs, but no depth, no love that stuck around when the charm wore off. And that's the real loss. Because no matter how many people clap for you, no matter how impressive your wins seem on the outside, nothing replaces the feeling of being truly seen and loved for who you are. And if you spend your life chasing applause instead of connection, eventually the applause fades, and you're left alone with the silence. So, if he played you like a game, understand this: you were never losing. You were just loving someone who didn't know what love required. You brought honesty to a stage where he was acting. And now that the curtains have closed and the spotlight's off, all he's left with is himself. And the painful awareness that the one person who showed up with something real is the one he can't win back. When people think about karma, they often imagine dramatic consequences, public downfalls, instant regrets, or poetic justice delivered in bold, unmistakable moments. But that's not how karma usually works. Karma, in its truest form, doesn't always crash in loudly. Sometimes it shows up quietly. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes in silence, in stillness, in those moments when the noise dies down and someone is left alone with the truth of who they are. The real karma is having to sit in the discomfort of a life built on ego, manipulation, or avoidance. And the people who spent their time playing games, taking others for granted, or refusing to grow, they often don't realize what they've done until it's far too quiet to ignore. This kind of karma is especially powerful for someone who has spent their life chasing attention. When you're used to being the center of everything, when your sense of worth depends on how many people admire you, message you, or orbit around you, silence is terrifying, because silence forces you to confront what's underneath all the noise. And if you've built your entire identity on ego, on how desirable, smart, or powerful you appear to others, then being alone with yourself is the last place you want to be. But karma brings you there. It removes the distractions. It closes the curtains. It ends the performance and leaves you with the truth. For someone whose ego was loud, whose presence always felt like a performance, this kind of karma doesn't feel like punishment at first. It feels like a slow unraveling. They start to notice that the people who used to fight for their time aren't showing up anymore. The ones who once tolerated their selfishness or gave them endless chances have quietly moved on. And what's left is a space where love used to be. No argument, no grand goodbye, just absence. And that absence speaks louder than any revenge ever could. They might scroll through their phone looking for someone to call, only to realize that they've pushed away the people who truly cared. Or they might find themselves reflecting at night, in those quiet moments before sleep, thinking about how good they had it with you, and how they let it slip away. That's karma. It's the echo of everything they didn't appreciate while it was there. It's the feeling of regret that creeps in when there's no one left to blame. No excuses, just reflection, just awareness. And what makes it even more powerful is that they can't undo it. Growth was available to them. Real connection was offered. They just weren't ready to receive it. They were too busy being right, being adored, being in control. But karma doesn't operate on their timeline. It shows up when life slows down, when their own patterns lead them into loneliness, or into repeated relationships that feel hollow compared to what they lost. And by then, the damage is done, not because someone punished them, but because the truth has finally caught up. This is the kind of karma that doesn't need to be witnessed by others. It doesn't need to be broadcast. It's personal. It's internal. And it stays with them in ways they can't talk their way out of. Because when everything else falls away, when the applause fades, when the ego has exhausted its energy, what's left is the weight of everything they didn't confront when they had the chance. And in that silence, karma speaks the loudest. He thought you'd wait. He thought you'd stay quietly in the background, always ready to forgive, always available when he decided to show up. In his mind, you were the constant, someone who'd always be there, no matter how little he gave, no matter how long he disappeared, no matter how many times he pushed your boundaries. And for a while, maybe you did wait. Maybe you gave him the benefit of the doubt. You tried to see the good in him, held space for the version of him he could be, and convinced yourself that love meant patience, even when it hurt. But here's the thing, there's a difference between being patient and being taken for granted. He never really saw that difference because he was too focused on himself, his timing, his convenience, his moods. He lived like there would always be another chance, another day, another moment when you'd be right there, waiting with open arms. He never thought the day would come when you'd stop showing up. He assumed you'd stay in the waiting room of his life, ready whenever he decided to let you in. And that assumption was his biggest mistake. He didn't realize that every time he ignored your needs, every time he withheld clarity, every time he made you question your worth, you were slowly changing, not out of bitterness, but out of self-preservation. You started to see through the charm. You began to recognize the cycle. And instead of blaming yourself, you started asking harder questions. Why am I waiting for someone who doesn't choose me? Why am I investing in someone who won't meet me halfway? Those questions led to answers, and those answers led to your freedom. The truth is, he got too comfortable. He mistook your kindness for weakness. He saw your love as permission to stall, to avoid growing, to stay emotionally unavailable, because he thought he could get away with it. But love doesn't mean putting your life on hold for someone else's indecision. And real strength is knowing when to walk away, even from someone you once deeply cared about. That's what you did. You walked away, not with drama or revenge, but with grace and clarity. And that's the moment everything started to shift. He might not admit it, but he felt it. He felt the moment your energy pulled back. He noticed the difference when your texts stopped coming in, when you stopped asking how he was doing, when you no longer responded to his mixed signals. Because for the first time, he wasn't in control. For the first time, he realized that love isn't something you can place on hold and expect to pick up right where you left off. You were done waiting. And that's when karma entered the room. Karma didn't come with anger. It came with silence, with your absence, with the realization that someone who truly loved him was no longer available to absorb the consequences of his emotional immaturity. And now, He's left with that empty space. He'll try to fill it, maybe with distractions, maybe with other people. But nothing will feel quite the same, because deep down, he knows he lost someone who was all in, and it was no one's fault but his own. You walking away was not just a turning point for him. It was a statement. It's saying, I deserve more than half love. I deserve to be chosen, not postponed. And while he sits with the weight of what he lost, you're already building a life where you don't have to wait to be seen, respected, or loved. He thought you would break, that when he pulled away acted cold, or made you question yourself, you would come running. He expected you to shrink under the weight of his silence, to chase him harder every time he grew more distant. He believed that the more he withheld, the more desperate you would become to earn his approval. That's how he played the game, making you feel like you were always one step away from being enough, as if love was a prize you had to win by proving your worth. But what he didn't count on was your healing. He never expected that one day, instead of chasing him, you would start choosing yourself. At first, maybe you did beg for clarity. Maybe you cried in silence, questioned what you did wrong, tried to fix things that weren't yours to fix. Your absence. What happens when you love someone who doesn't know how to love you back? You take responsibility for their emptiness, hoping that if you just love them harder, it'll be enough. But somewhere along the way, you realized that loving him was slowly costing you your peace. You were losing yourself in the process of trying to hold onto him. And that realization was the beginning of everything. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't always come with declarations or dramatic exits. Sometimes healing looks like slowly pulling back, like answering less, like choosing not to engage with every breadcrumb of affection he threw your way. Sometimes it means spending nights alone, rebuilding your self-worth brick by brick, without needing anyone to see the process. That's what you did. You healed in silence. You didn't announce it. You didn't need him to know. You just started showing up for yourself the way you used to show up for him. And in doing so, you became the version of you that he never imagined losing. He thought he had time. He thought that no matter what, you'd still be there. Still hoping, still giving, still waiting. But he missed the moment when your energy changed. He didn't notice when the tone of your texts stopped carrying warmth. He didn't see the shift in your eyes when you stopped trying to prove your love. By the time he realized something was different, it was too late, because now the power dynamic had changed. You weren't trying to win him anymore. You were too busy becoming someone who didn't need to be won. That's the plot twist karma loves most. The one where the person who was taken for granted becomes unreachable. Not because they turned bitter, but because they evolved. You didn't become colder, you just became clearer. You didn't stop loving, you just stopped offering that love to someone who didn't value it. And now, while he's sitting with the regret of what he let slip through his fingers, you're outgrowing the version of yourself that thought he was the best you could have. He might try to come back. That's usually what happens when someone realizes too late what they had. But it won't be the same. Not because you want revenge, but because you've changed. The old version of you, the one who would have taken him back just for a little bit of love, is gone. And what's left is someone who knows their worth too deeply to entertain half-hearted efforts. That's how healing becomes karma, not by hurting the person who hurt you, but by becoming someone they can no longer access. The best plot twist isn't payback. It's peace. It's evolution. It's becoming so whole on your own that they can't find the door back in, because you closed it, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. There comes a point where you realize that peace is more powerful than payback, that the energy you once spent trying to make someone understand how much they hurt you, trying to get closure or recognition or even an apology, is energy that can be used to rebuild yourself. The person who wronged you may never fully understand the damage they caused, and eventually, you stop needing them to. That's not weakness, it's growth. Because true healing isn't about watching someone else suffer. It's about reaching a place where their actions no longer have control over your emotions. You could have chosen bitterness. You had every reason to. The way he treated you. The games, the mixed signals, the coldness disguised as mystery. It wasn't love, it was manipulation. He kept you on edge just enough to keep you hoping, made you question yourself until you forgot how much you were worth. For a while, maybe you fantasized about him getting what he deserved, about someone doing to him what he did to you. But then something shifted. You realized that waiting for karma to hit him wasn't helping you rise. It was keeping you stuck in a story that no longer served you. When you stopped focusing on his downfall and started focusing on your own rise, everything changed. The power dynamic shifted, because nothing is more unsettling to someone who thrives on control than being met with indifference. Not anger, not revenge, just a quiet, grounded refusal to give them access to your life anymore. That's the moment karma really begins. Not when they suffer, but when they lose the version of you they were so sure would never leave. And the irony is, you didn't need to lift a finger. Your peace did the work for you. The kind of peace you cultivated didn't happen overnight. It came through late nights of reflection, through letting go of conversations you knew you'd never have, through the difficult process of unlearning the idea that you had to earn love. It came through choosing yourself again and again, even when your heart still remembered him. Peace is earned. And in choosing it, you gave yourself a gift he never could: freedom. Freedom from the chaos, the second guessing, the emotional roller coaster. That's what he can't touch now. The truth is, people who lead with ego often assume that their absence will break you. But when you rise in their absence, when you become softer in spirit yet stronger in boundaries, that's when they feel the weight of what they lost. Not because you punished them, not because you orchestrated some dramatic moment of revenge, but because your silence, your happiness, your refusal to look back says everything. And nothing stings more than being forgotten by someone who once loved you deeply. What you have now, your clarity, your calm, your refusal to re-enter a dynamic that drained you, is the ultimate resolution. Because peace isn't just about feeling good. It's about knowing that you're no longer participating in anything that makes you question your value. And while he may still be caught in his old patterns, trying to recreate the feeling you once gave him, you've outgrown the need to prove anything. Karma doesn't always come with chaos. Sometimes it comes wrapped in grace. And the most poetic justice is this: you moved on without needing him to fall apart. You didn't need to see him hurt. You just needed to see yourself heal. And now that you have, the chapter is closed. Not because he said sorry, but because you finally realized you don't need him to. Peace wrote the ending you were waiting for. In the end, it wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving him wrong or watching him suffer. It was about reclaiming your power. The power to walk away, to heal in silence, and to rise without needing applause. He thought you'd always be there. He thought love meant waiting. But what he didn't understand is that real love doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It doesn't sit quietly in the background hoping to be chosen. You chose yourself. And that choice, more than anything, is what karma looks like, not in his downfall, but in your peace, your strength, your unshakable sense of worth. The loudest karma is the life you're building now, one where your value is never questioned, your love is never wasted, and your heart is finally held by someone who doesn't need to be taught how to treat it.